Okay, welcome, good people. Welcome to weekly guided meditation class. My name is Michael Zattel, Buddhist meditation teacher. Each week we sit together, do some guided meditation, maybe get into a little bit of theory, a little bit of Buddhist psychology. Today we're going to be working with. I do have a interest in Buddhist psychology and an interest in the mental factors for people that have studied with me. I like to use this one metaphor of the chef that tastes the soup and is able to discern the various flavors that are present in the soup. Maybe what there needs to be a little bit more of, what there needs to be a little bit less of. The mental factors are essentially kind of the ingredients of the mind, so to speak. Very simplified. So Jivitindriya is one of those mental factors. Yeah. It's considered one of the universal mental factors. That means it's always present. And it's defined as a life force energy. Yeah. So there can be the life force energy that's within the body that sustains and animates the body. There's the life force energy that sustains and animates the mind. And then it goes further to say that um, it tends to give life to the other mental factors that are present. So it makes it a bit of a neutral mental factor in that respect. Some are pleasant or wholesome or beautiful mental factors, beautiful mental states. Some are unwholesome, unskillful, rather negative ones. And some are neutral. And so I guess Jivitindriya would be considered neutral in that respect. It's just awake and alive. Howsoever, if we can get into that experience of it, the flavor of it, or the characteristic it's described as having, is ceaseless watching. So, for those of us who are into doing this meditation practice, there is a an interest in sustaining that mindfulness. Yeah, from moment to moment, we may be mindful for a little bit, and then we're off, and then we come back, and then we're off. There's this tendency to become distracted from our mindfulness practice, distracted from whatever object of focus we are letting our attention on, distracted from whatever practice we are engaged in. So, this ceaseless watching component, there is something that is always there, awake and alive. And if we can rest our attention in that, there's something that is rather vitalizing about that experience. And I want to compare that to another mental factor, Upadana. Sometimes it's translated as attachment or clinging or grasping. The um, one aspect of the definition that I tend to go towards is fuel. Yeah. So it's one thing to have a negative thought that arises or some negative sensory experience that arises. But when our attention, some aspect of mind tends to cling to it and then ruminate on it. And it kicks in the default mode network, and we start to assess and pull it apart and start to pour on memories and ideas and patterns. The mind goes off to the races, just pouring fuel on that fire that can create a negative mental state or a negative mood, negative perception. And then, that leads to certain facets of suffering, including, there's a volitional force component to it. What does that then make us do? So, the, somewhat subtle, they both have this sense of, they tend to give life to or sustain other mental factors. Yeah. The Jivitindriya, that life force energy component, really just speaks to, and it seems to be it's a little bit underlying the Upadana intends that in the respect that um, it gives life to and sustains the energy. Yeah. So that could be towards the pleasant or the unpleasant. The Upadana really talks about that tendency to grasp and fixate and really continue to cultivate negative hindrances. So, this is what I'd like to explore. What is the experience of fixation of the mind? What is the experience of moving away from the ceaseless watching and then getting caught up? Yeah. And then being able to let go of that and come back to a ceaseless watching. That's kind of the idea that I'd like to explore a bit today. On the back end, I could go into a little bit more of mental states and Buddhist psychology and such, if that's of interest. But let's get into a sit for now. So allow yourself to come to a comfortable upright position. Okay, straightening up and settling in. You can start off by just settling into the posture. However, the body is ideally upright, whether you're sitting cross legged on the ground or sitting in a chair. If the hips are elevated over the knees, that tends to alleviate any stress, pressure on the lower lumbar there, and it allows the spine to just naturally unfurl upward. So, having this global awareness of the posture, being aware of the breath, that tends to buoy this experience up. The breath being the wind in the sails. If you'd like to narrow your focus to some facet of breath, the nose, throat, lungs, belly, sometimes that simplification of contact tends to make it easier to have an object to relate to. So we're starting off with this body only focus, just abiding in feel space, the feel out, pressure on pressure sensations, with this respect, the posture, and the breath. And then there are the feel in qualities of whatever pleasant hedonic tone arises from attending to breath and stillness in this way. This is how we're entering into the shamatha aspect phase of this sit, stoking concentration. So, really attempt to be present with this breath. We have the in breath, the top of the in breath, the out breath, the base of the out breath. It's easy to just assume breathing is happening, and then the default mode network turns on and the mind starts going. Really attempting to allow the images that we see, the internal talk we hear, to fall into the background. Redirecting your attention back towards the body, back towards this breath. And just following this narrow strand of sensation allows you to ride this edge into the ever unfurling present moment. Leaning into the pleasant feel tones that arise from attending to breath in this way. The more that we can discern the presence of the subtle pleasantness, that creates another pleasant moment, which we can appreciate, which creates another pleasant moment. That's setting up the conditions for positive feedback loop. Again, this is a shamatha phase, so we're cultivating a calm abiding. And then taking a moment to just open up to the mind here without losing contact with the breath, with posture. Just allowing yourself to be open. What's the mental space like? What's the mental sphere like? Is there a lot of thinking going on? Is it consistent or subtle? Very active or sparse? Just whenever you can notice moments of rest in the images or rest in the internal talk, whenever there's a quietness in the mind, just recognize when that occurs and appreciate. Just in the way that we are appreciating the restful, pleasant qualities in the body, the mind not needing to know or figure out or struggle. but the mind being simple and at rest, quiet. There's a pleasant quality. Appreciate rest in the mind when you observe it. Okay, good. So, as we are leaning into, if we're taking, for example, leaning into the breath, take, for example, our attention may be at a narrow focus, just at the nose, the throat, the lungs, the belly, coming back into the body here. Taking a few moments to being just with that experience. So that attention is outward towards the object, so to speak. That may make sense because it's implied in our language. It may even be implied within our experience that there's some conscious awareness that is extending outward towards a location. So there may be some attention looking down at the nose or feeling down into the belly, wherever it is you choose to focus on breath. So let's walk that backwards. Where is that attention coming from? This might be a subtle shift here. The object, that is to say, we're looking at the breath, whatever here. Now let's turn our attention towards the subject. When we're noticing the quietness, the quietude in the mind, that can help us be a little bit more present to that experience. That mental factor of just that life force energy. Whatever it is that you're experiencing that is awake, that is alive, that experience of vitalizing wakefulness in the mind. It's rather simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Just feel that brightness. That brightness of the mind. So it's a little bit more subtle, but it's present. This is a universal mental factor. It's always there, often covered by, clouded by the active thoughts. The more that the mind can be quiet and at rest, the more easy it is to just abide in, contact, rest in, and abide in this vitalizing force. Just in the way that we are simply resting in, attending to the pleasant qualities of breath, allowing that to stabilize our attention, and in part, noticing what is pleasant about that and appreciating that, which creates another pleasant moment that overall sustains our connection. In the same way, shifting our attention to this vitalizing life force of the mind, that which is awake, bright, vitalizing. Notice it however it expresses itself. This ceaseless watching component. There's something inherently pleasant about that. Notice, give yourself permission to feel what is pleasant, which creates another pleasant moment, which sets up this positive feedback loop as we continue to allow attention to rest in this life force energy. Just resting in, appreciating the qualities bright, awake, aware, expansive, inherently equanimous, open, vibrant. Appreciating those qualities, allowing those qualities to permeate your being. There's a softening around and allowing of. Okay, good. So maybe you tasted that for a little bit. Could be brief, could be fleeting, could be well established. Chances are, as always, part of this human experiences, we have various hindrances happening, the cravings, aversions, unconsciousness, qualities of restlessness, doubt, whatever these things are that obscure the path, become obstructions, usually in the form of thinking or emotive states in the body. Let's turn our attention towards those for a bit, yeah? The quality of Upadana, the fixation, the grasping that occurs, that becomes fuel, that prolongs it to the next moment. There could be an unpleasant sensation that creates some subtle aversion. We climb into our mind. There's some entertainment factor. We pour some fuel on that and engage in entertaining thinking, for example. That's the upadana, that's the burdensome carrying of the unpleasant that makes us break connection with the present moment. What is it that you are fixating on in this moment? What is it that the mind is attaching to and prolonging, sustaining by creating a little bit more what in the body, by creating a bit more what in the mind? So, in the background, we can have breath, we can have this awareness, this vitalizing force. Have that going in the background, but foreground, start assessing, sussing out what feels fixated. That is to say, your attention fixating. It can be very subtle under the radar. Usually, some feeling in the body, some component of imaging in the mind, some component of internal talk in the mind. Just notice, where is the mind going? This is whatever arises that interrupts, distracts from the ceaseless watching. Some thought, some feeling, or clinging, clutching, grasping around, or pushing away from. In the moment of waking up to that, it unfixates, ideally. And we can notice how we can move back towards fluidity. In particular, the fading away, the cessation, the gone. And in its absence, this presence of this vitalizing force can come through again. Just the arising and fading. Simply that. We notice ourselves getting fixated. That's the Upadana, fueling it, sustaining it. We let go of that fixation and it returns to fluidity, flow, fading, cessation, gone. The life force quality vitalizes again. We can rest our attention in it again. So let's come back primarily to again resting our attention in the Jivitindriya, that life force energy quality and consciousness. Appreciating its qualities, awake, alive, vitalizing. In a way, it creates the positive fuel for sustained attention. This quality of the ceaseless watching that is unburdened by clinging or fixation. Now then, being aware of these qualities of the life force there. And again, this is all an expression of a shamatha exercise. We are just cultivating this stabilized attention, this stabilized mind, this cultivating of a calm, pleasant abiding. And we're just taking simply for our object this vitalizing force of consciousness. And we can appreciate it. This ceaseless watching, unburdened, bright, vital, energized, awake. We can experience this somewhat on a contracted or localized level, you know, just behind the eyes, between the ears, this spark of vibrant energy in the mind. It's a little bit of the contractive quality of this awareness. And we can also move towards this more vaster peripheral awareness, noticing how there is also this perception, this sensing, contact of spaciousness around. That life force is there within that as well. So there can be also as well more of an expansive expression of this. We can observe the life force energy in a more expansive, spacious fashion, or a more contractive, localized expression, localized to the head, to where we feel the origination of consciousness. And from time to time, we may feel that origination from consciousness is outside in a more expansive way. So allow yourself to play, to explore this life force quality expansively, contractively, localized or spacious, free float. explore. Expansively, contractively, just following this trend of the bright, spacious, open, compassionate, quantumizing, vibrant. Whether it's broader or smaller, the outer boundary or the inner belly button of experience. Be present for it. And know that the Upadana is going to occur from time to time. Some grasping fixation, fueling a sustained fixation. See it clearly for what it is. Fading cessation, relinquishing, opening back up to the vitalizing life force. Okay, good. Drop all momentum, drop all effort. I'm sorry, drop all technique, drop all effort. But you may notice a momentum of the currents of what you have been generating thus far. And just go with that. Just yield and allow and have that ceaseless watching. Be present, allowing the meditation to do you. We're moving from active towards grace, allowing it to pull you forward. Okay, at ease. So, little cliff notes of what we did there. Opened up with the shamatha focus. We can make the argument that the whole exercise was a shamatha exercise, with a little bit of vipassana in there. Shamatha, cultivating concentration qualities, cultivating calm abiding, relinquishing the sense of urgency, scatteredness. So we started off with this breath body focus. Then we moved from what we're focusing on to what is focusing. Yeah, so that's introduced our connectivity, the connection to the Jivitindriya, the life force quality, searching for that vitalizing force of consciousness, the awake, a watching quality. And from there, we hung out there for a bit. And then afterwards, we kind of moved back towards what's clinging, what's fixating. Yeah, and looking at that experience of cling and fixation. And then moving from fixation to flow, we can notice the fading away, cessation, and then an inevitable return to that vitalizing consciousness quality. And then just moving back and forth from there. Then we looked at it locally, how it may just be localized to here, to expansively, how it may move beyond the body into spaciousness. And then at a certain point, we just dropped all technique and just rode the momentum. So that's the cliff notes of what we did. So this whole thing of all these Pali terms of Upadana, Jivitindriya, that comes from, well, they're mental factors again. So it comes from the languaging around the Buddhist psychology. So that's not a just made up term. Refers to one of the three baskets of the Pali Canon, the surviving teachings that are held within Theravada Buddhism. So it's the Sutta Pitaka, which would be all of the teachings of the Buddha, the Vinaya Pitaka, or all of the rules and practices of the monastics. And then third is the Abhidhamma Pitaka. That's where the Buddhist psychology quality comes in. So what we're looking at is what we were looking at was two particular, how shall we say, cetasikas or mental factors. Again, the quality of the chef tasting the soup and being able to discern the ingredients by self-reflecting on the experience of the mind. What are the ingredients of the mind? That's the way that I like to talk about it. A little bit more of a uh, um, technical definition. There are aspects of mind that tend to apprehend the quality of an object and as well have the ability to color the mind. So, what does that mean? Apprehending an object. So, when we're talking about contacting the breath, yeah, that's apprehending the object of the breath. So, our attention is brought to the breath, bringing your attention to the breath at the nose. Yeah. So just sensitizing ourselves to that experience there. We're apprehending the object. We're contacting the object. So certain mental qualities involved with that experience. There's the mental factor of contact. Yeah, it became aware in our consciousness. We became a consciousness. Our attention alighted upon it. Yeah, there's the perception of what it is. There's the feeling. Is it, what type of hedonic valence does it have? Is it pleasant or is it unpleasant? There's the application of thought to it. There's the examination of it. Yeah, those are all mental factors. Those are all qualities or activities of the mind. Cetasikas, mental factors that have to do with kind of holding a facet of our experience and attention in a way that we can experience it, investigate it, stabilize our attention on it. The other aspect is that the mental factors have a way of coloring the mind. So those could be qualities of calmness, equanimity, acceptance, greed, hatred, envy, faith, etc. Now, then, within Buddhist psychology, there's not a lot of talk about emotions as we understand them today. The mental factors may have somewhat of an overlap. When we talk about these qualities of calmness, equanimity, greed, hatred, envy, well, maybe they're emotions. We can probably normally our mind might categorize them such. But within all of them, there's, how shall we say, there's something about when the state of calmness arises, it has an influence and impact on the mind, has an influence and impact on the body, the nervous system. There may be some volitional force, some behind it, some mode to do or not do something. So greed, there's this craving quality in the mind. There's this envious quality that can arise that colors our perception and it might drive our behavior. So these ways that there's also these mental factors that color the mind in that respect. So how's it, some are a little bit more technical, contacting part of our experience, and some of it is coloring our experience. So the two that we looked at today, Jivitindriya, the life force energy, sometimes it's referred to as the life faculty or the vitality. Again, the more technical definition sustains the life of the chitta or extends the life of that momentary mind activity and the other mental factors it accompanies. So if I'm experiencing calmness, the Jivitindriya tends to there's that life force, the beingness of it, and the sustainingness of it. Yeah. Um, and of course, the experiential component of it is the ceaseless watching. So that's what we're attempting to hone in on. Just the raw quality of that awakeness, that life force. And we can notice how when there's a mental factor that arises and then it sustains it, you know, that's why we're tending to look towards the pleasant, positive ones. But what we did, also part of it was looking at um, the negative aspect, the upadana, the clinging. Yeah. So again, attachment, clinging, grasping. There's the sense of fuel. There's some discussions within the suttas where Buddha talks about suffering or dukkha as a flame on a stick. The flame itself, the burning is the dukkha or the suffering. And if you have a stick, you can't just shake the stick and shake that flame off of it. There's this clinging quality. Yeah, it clings, the fire clings to the stick. And at the same time, the stick, being wood, is also a fuel that's creating it. If somehow it's extinguished, you pour water on it, or somehow the wood is burnt down to ash, there's no more fuel. There's nothing to cling to, and thus the suffering dissipates, or thus the flame is extinguished. So that Upadana is really looking at that clinging and fuel component of mind. Yeah. So they say it's a result of tanha or craving. I'd say by extension, all the rest of the hindrances as well. Um, and again, the Jivitendriya is part of a family of what's referred to as the universal mental factors. It was described to me as these are all mental factors that are always present all the time. If you're missing any one of them, then you might be in a bit of more of a vegetative or compromised state. So they refer to pasa or contact, vedana or the feel tone, that hedonic valence of pleasant to unpleasant to neutral. Refers to a sanya or perception, uh, cetana or volition, ekagata or that single pointed focus. We've explored this before. Or sometimes I like to look at it as the balancing quality of mind. The manisakaras, the attention, and the jivitindriyas, the life force faculty. So there's something interesting about exploring all of those universal qualities, universal mental factors that are always present. But as far as um, you know, my interest is in awakening. My interest is in liberation. My interest is, well, in that liberation. It's the knowing what it is that's creating the suffering and the way to extinguish that. So, what we did was look under the microscope at the petri dish. But then, how does that apply to life? So, a little bit of homework, getting off the cushion. Can there be some semblance of attention that is still aware of this life force, this vitalizing quality? And can that be carried? And of course, we forget. but then can you remember? For me, it's a bit of a game that I like to play as I'm, I might be resting or relaxing, or I might be having a conversation, or I might be driving. And I notice that there's some distraction quality occurring. Distraction in driving, default mode network happening, or maybe I'm in a social situation and maybe some kind of anxious quality is arising. In either way, those are kind of like unwholesome chittasikas happening, unwholesome mental states occurring, or, a dullness of mind in one case, restless, anxious quality in another. And then I attempt to notice that. And in the backdrop of that, is there this life force quality that tends to help relinquish that fixation and just bring that quality forward. So that can be somewhat of a game of cultivating these qualities off the cushion. So there's that. Okay. That about does it for today. We can end with a dedication of merit. By the merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those that come before us, after us, and to those who walk beside us on the path. Alrighty. Thanks for coming out and sitting. Hope to see you next round.